Hi and welcome. My name is Steve Hagler, and I'm the Executive Director of LearnUp Centers. And I'm excited to have you here today. This is Dyslexia Awareness Month, and we are fortunate to be able to have a conversation with Nicole Krasinski, a LearnUp parent and a well-known chef in the Bay Area. Hey, Nicole, it's really good to connect with you. I just want to tell you, as you know, I've been working out with your husband for, I think, a decade now. And one day, your husband, Stuart Brioza, who is your partner, a restaurateur and chef, and the father of your son, Jasper, and we were working out, and it was right as the pandemic began, and we were starting to, like, what are we doing? What's happening? And what's going to happen with your restaurant? And he says, so Steve, what are you up to? And I go, like, oh, I'm running this nonprofit. And she says, what's happening with your nonprofit? And I said, well, I'm teaching kids to read. And he stopped. He goes, you're doing what? I said, I'm teaching kids to read. And he goes, like, we need to talk. I have a son that needs to learn how to read. And we started talking about Jasper and his reading struggles, and it led us down this pathway. So I want to get to that. But before we start, I wanted to have a quick conversation with you about your career and how you balance it all. You're a chef in your own right, or a restaurateur, an entrepreneur, and you also raising a son with learning differences. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you've made it through this journey.
Yeah, so awesome to be here talking with you today as well. I feel very passionate about this subject, even though we didn't know what it was for so long, but now that we do, I want to tell everyone about this journey. So yeah, pastry chef, restaurant owner. We just opened our third restaurant. So now we have 4 babies, not just 3. And that takes a lot of my time, and a lot of hours are devoted to it. And Jasper's had a lot of different people in his life helping to raise him, family and friends. And it's truly like the community, as they say, it takes a community, and we have done that. And coming home at night after work and sitting with him for 45 minutes, trying to do homework, first grade math, second grade math, third grade math, and just fighting about it was really traumatizing for both of us. It was from kindergarten until now. His education has been traumatic. And so we're so happy that we found LearnUp, and we see some sort of light now down the road.
So tell us a little bit about, when did you start noticing the struggles with reading?
So he was in a Japanese immersion program starting in kindergarten, which of course, in retrospect, is probably the worst thing we could have done for the poor kid. But I was really passionate about public school here in San Francisco, being a public school child, and my husband went to public school. I had a vision of what our life would be. We live in the neighborhood where the restaurants are, and there are great public schools in the neighborhood. And so I thought, we could support this public school through doing fundraising through the restaurant that's also in the neighborhood, and he could walk to school, and how cool would that be, this urban public school experience. And there was one literally across the street from the restaurant that had a Japanese immersion program, and he's always really been into animation and manga. And so I thought, wow, that's Japanese, he'll probably really enjoy that piece of it. And so kindergarten went well, he had a good time, he had a great teacher. And then first grade came, and it was like, he started getting homework, and he couldn't, do it maybe as quickly as I thought he should, or complete the assignments at school. And you would go to the classroom and look at all the kids' work that was displayed, and they would have these little stories written, and it would be like, well, where's Jasper's? It's like, well, Jasper didn't finish his packet, so he has nothing on the wall. And he would tell me these funny things like, oh, Mom, when you go to back to school night, you're going to see a lot of unfinished packets in my desk. Like, it was just, he saw himself like not being able to complete the work that his classmates could complete. And he just kind of stopped trying. And so we did have him go through a neuropsychological evaluation when he was 7, and they found some auditory processing things, but didn't say anything about dyslexia. They actually said, we don't think he is dyslexic. And then it was continuing to be an issue with his academics. And so I pushed and pushed and pushed for an IEP through the public schools. And they finally did the evaluation. And when I went to the meeting, they said, you know, a lot of times it's hard to figure out what's happening with these kids, but with Jasper, like, it is so clear that he has dyslexia. So when he was 9, we got that determination.
So you had a neuropsych then he was 7,
Mm-hmm.
and had an IEP finished at age 9. So in those interim 2 years, what was going on?
Lots of yelling, lots of tears, lots of yelling. So I asked him this morning, and I said, you know, if you could tell somebody, if you were in this interview with me and you could tell them like how you felt before you knew you had dyslexia, and then how you felt after. And he said, well, before I knew I had it, I thought I was dumb and that I would never amount to anything. Like, I wouldn't be able to get a job. I wouldn't be able to do anything. And now that I know I have dyslexia, I feel like I can become a screenwriter, which is what I want to do. I know that there are tools out there for me.
Yeah, that is such a powerful statement. I mean, the pre-post, like I think that every kid we see at Learn Up comes into kindergarten believing they're the smartest child in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And if they have learning differences, or if they don't know how to read very well, if they struggle with learning how to read, they look around the room and they see that they're the dumbest kid in the room because they're the only one.
Yeah.
Even though it's not true.
Yeah, they think they are, though.
They do. And they know because the whole system's based on learning how to read, that they're the stupidest one too.
Yes.
And it is a relief when they finally learn that actually reading is a skill, and they can do it. And that means that, you know, they're not dumb. It's a revelation.
Yeah. The whole conversation now is that this isn't a roadblock. It's his superpower. Like, he has something that most people don't have. And he is so happy to tell people about it. Whenever he meets someone, most of the time, at some point in their early conversation, he'll be like, oh, well, this and this and this, I have dyslexia. Like, and this morning he was talking about, you know, remember, Mom, how like dyslexia is actually like the primal brain, because we are not supposed to be sitting doing packets. We're supposed to be building huts. Like, that's what I'm built for.
Wow. That is so great. That is so wonderful. And it's true. And I mean, it's like, you know, part of it is, you know, our role as educators and parents is to get them out of education and into the real world, where the true power is the visual thinking, the ability to see the end of a problem before they could describe what the problem is.
That's right.
The structure of their brain is so unique that they can do things that are more linear, kind of academic, sort of traditional academic brains are not as good at. You know, sometimes we ask our students to look at our magnetic board and say, okay, like, can you see the board in your mind's eye? And they can not only see it, but they can turn it around on its axis, which is phenomenal, right? This ability to see 3-dimensionally and to visually see those things inside their mind's eye is really powerful.
Yeah.
You were telling a story earlier before we came on about your husband Stuart, who is also dyslexic. I wonder if you would relay that story really quickly about his food. Yeah. So
he is at the restaurant many nights, and he had some guests come up to him when they were finished with their meal, husband and wife, and said, you know, are you the chef owner? He's like, yeah, I'm Stuart. And they said, are you dyslexic? And he was sort of a little bit taken aback because he had never met these people. And he said, well, yeah, how did you know? And they said, well, your food and the design of your restaurants are unlike anything we've ever experienced. And we're both dyslexic, and our children are dyslexic. And only someone with a brain wired like that could possibly come up with something like this. And so it's, you know, now it's sort of like when you have your appendix out, you start to meet all these other people that have had that. Like, now that we are in this world, you're like, oh, of course, that makes so much sense that your brain thinks differently.
Yeah. So talk through about, when you came to, I think as, kids go through their early years in education, teachers are often like, okay, this kid's having a little bit of trouble getting going, like they just need a little more time. Or often it's a boy, it's immature.
That's right.
What was your experience with, because the educators are trying to do the right thing and they mean well, but how did that show up in your world?
So it was just like you said, he met most of his milestones, right? As he was growing, you're like looking for these milestones, and he met most of them. And it was pretty clear from early on that he had some emotional challenges, and had he went to therapy for certain things. And I think a lot of that was tied into just his lack of trusting the system from such a young age, because everyone kept telling us, and so he would hear that, or we would kind of say the same thing to him, like, you just need to try harder, you just need to read more, or when you're in third grade, it's all going to click, like we see it all the time, like there's nothing happening, and then all of a sudden one day it'll change, and it never did. And he kept getting farther and farther behind academically, and he would come home from school every day defeated. Like, how was school? It sucked. I hate school. I don't want to go back. It's boring. Everyone else, like, they finish their work and then they get to go play, or they finish their work and they get extra, like a prize. And since he could never get any of that, it was just so frustrating for him. And so to be able to finally have a reason for it, I feel like he's starting to build more trust with adults. And in LearnUp, when I asked him, like, if you could describe your experience with that program, what would you have to say about it? And he said, well, I really felt like my tutor took the time to get to know me, and she genuinely seemed interested in things I was interested in. And every session at the end, we would talk about that. And so he felt this trust, because she wasn't just like, you're going to do this, I don't care who you are, kind of thing. Because I feel like a lot of kids with these differences, they have such a rich inner world and they just want to broadcast it. But people, especially at this age, it's like, no, you have to do this and you have to do that before you can move on to get those more exciting things.
And just describe, like, what was the main difference between how he was being taught to learn in I think you started working with another tutor, and what was that? And then your experience coming into LearnUp, and what do you think made the differences? Like, what were the aspects that stood out to you?
Well, I feel like it was just all about the phonetics and like learning within the programming that the teachers had in public schools. And it wasn't working, but they didn't really have any other tools in their toolbox to help him. And so it was just sort of like repeating the same thing and trying to do it more to get him to get enough practice to get to that point where things would finally change. And I think I know one of the big things with LearnUp is just the content, because kids with dyslexia, they have such creative brains, but what they can actually read is generally books written for really little kids. And so to have content that you actually like, you can for him, he only wants to read or listen to books where he can visualize what's happening. And it's like the words have like a lot of texture and interest. And so the program does such a great job and clearly puts a lot of time into building stories that the kids can read that are at appropriate levels for what they can decode.
And if I remember correctly, when I met Jasper, he was very much reluctant to come into reading another reading program. He's like, this isn't going to work. Tell us how he's doing now. Where is he, and what's going on with this world as he's moved through this program?
So he did the 120 hours, and like I was saying to you earlier, I think doing the 5 sessions a week,
right,
Monday through Friday, had such a big impact, because when he was just doing the once a week tutoring, or even a little bit here and there through his school, it clearly wasn't making a difference. So having also just kind of that anticipation, like this is what's like building the rhythm was really helpful for him. And having it with the same person every day, again, building upon that relationship. So that was really great. And now he has transitioned from his second public school. He switched out of the Japanese program, went to a second public school, was better, but still not working. And now he's attending Stern School, which is designed specifically for kids like him. And we had applied to a few other private schools in San Francisco that did not want anything to do with him. And so to find a place like this where he really he can look at his classmates and they all have different reasons they're there, but they're all learning in a different way. And he comes home every day. And his house school, it was great. Like we did this and this and this, and we're building this, and I worked with this kid on this, and he gets to do art every day, which is amazing. And he loves his teacher. And it's like his confidence is growing exponentially. And we've only been there since the end of August. So I can't even imagine at the end of the year what it's going to be like. And the fact that he feels like he's in a place where they're not going to be putting this academic pressure on him has made such a difference. Because just the stress of, I think, going into every school day thinking like, they're going to want me to do this thing that I can't do. And so now he gets to go. And even though he still has hard days and the content can still be challenging for him, he feels like it's achievable and he's making progress.
So can you talk about how Jasper, related to the content in LearnUp and how it, did he take to it right away? Did it take a moment or,
he's a hard kid to crack. He likes just to tell you, like it takes a lot to get through to him. So because we were also doing it through Zoom, obviously having the screen there, it wasn't like he just automatically was like, this is awesome. It's work and it's hard and I'm going to study. Like his tutor really had to take time and understand like, okay, he needs a break after 15 minutes and we'll give him a 2-minute break. And then when he comes back, he's able to focus so much better than if we tried to just push through. And he also really ended up loving, he had a reading specialist in public school as well that he would work with every day for 30 minutes. And he would say, well, like, oh, in my, tutoring yesterday, we learned about the hungry vowels or whatever, like there were all these terms and he would teach her about the things he was learning. So he like just the way things are called out and grouped together. Like he loved the story of the letters kind of.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to hire him for do some publicity for us and maybe become a tutor. It's interesting because if I remember correctly, Jasper came to us reading about the second grade, right? And he was in the fourth grade. And so now he's in the fifth grade and pretty much reading on grade level, if I have it correct.
Pretty close, yeah. And he is also willingly reading things. He still like prefers listening to books on tape, but if we're like, looking at the television for something, like he will go through all of the upcoming episodes in a show he wants, and he'll read the title of each one. And like little thing, like he would never do that before. He would just be like, can you read them all for me? But now he's like actively, like if he wants information from something, he tries to see if he can read it.
But it's empowering to be able to do that on your own, right? And not be dependent on a parent or another adult to read it for you. I know that we have a former student who was really interested in martial arts. And his dad would turn on Japanese films so that he was into the samurai, so he had to read the subtitles, and that helped him push his reading up here. I mean, that's part of it, is right. The ultimate goal is to make them into beach readers, like somebody who wants to read because they can are able to do it. And we get there by the academics and floating and going through the classroom properly, but really. We want them to do both. We want them to be able to read what they want to be able to do. What they can read,
Mhm.
And if they do that through audiobooks or through video, that's fine too, because stories
Yeah.
are just that, they're stories, and how you get there is less the important piece. The reading piece is the underlying skill sets that unlocks the rest of the academics. So if you can't do that,
Mhm.
you
Right.
get stuck, right? So it's important that our kids have access to decoding abilities and at a level that they
Mhm.
can stay inside the classroom and not feel left out.
Yeah. Yes.
What do you, if you were a parent coming up again and you were coming through the system and now you're doing it all over again, what
Mhm.
advice would you give to that parent?
I would probably try, and I wouldn't let anyone tell me, like, "Your kid's gonna be fine." Like,
Mm.
I would push for the testing, and if I had to do it every year to see what was coming up, because I think there is a lot of just it's hard to know when they're little, right? Like, everything hasn't presented itself maybe in the way that it will as they get older, but I think I would push for getting as much information as I could every year until there was an answer that really made sense.
And is there any advice that you give as teachers?
I think the trust thing is really big, like, really understand, like, we all know everyone's brain works differently, right? But with these kids, it is so different, and especially if it's like I didn't know anything about this, so as a parent, I didn't have the tools to help him, and so I think if the teachers have the ability to do, like, education outside of the classroom to understand these kinds of kids, because obviously we're so privileged to be able to go to Stern, and we have found the place that does, but that's so rare. And so to be able to have empower teachers that are in classrooms with 23 kids to have the knowledge to, and also to recognize the differences at an earlier age, I think would be immensely helpful.
Yeah, it's one of the issues with our current pre-service training programs is that most teachers colleges don't teach about dyslexia
Mhm.
enough, or if they do, they don't touch on it in depth. Some do, some are doing a very good job,
Yeah.
but in general, and we're not teaching teachers how to teach using structured literacy or structured phonics, such as what we're doing at LearnUp, and so
Yeah.
therefore they're using systems that actually don't work for 20% of our population who
Yeah.
need
They're just more
a structured.
confusing.
Yep. And then, and so, part of it is both. You have to, upstream, get more teachers learning how to
Mhm.
teach reading earlier.
Yeah.
Maybe they come to LearnUp and learn with us because we do teach teachers how to teach reading. And then downstream in the remediation program is having a more responsive program that works with that child
Mhm.
where they are and is able to bring them to grade level very quickly. Right.
Mhm.
So it's a both. And
Mhm.
then inside the classroom, if you can recognize that a child is struggling who otherwise should be able to do
Right.
all the work and is smart
Mhm.
enough and
Mhm.
is engaged enough and is there, and that is not a child who doesn't want to learn. It's a child who probably has other things going on, and we should have a second look and see what's keeping them from accessing the
Right.
classroom.
Yeah, I think that was part of one of his struggles, is that he's such a smart kid, and people would say that to him, but then he would see his pile of unfinished schoolwork and feel bad about
So
himself.
discouraging. It's incredibly discouraging, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, and
Yeah.
one of the mottos someone said at Stern the first day was, "Kids will excel if they can." Like, if they're given the proper kind of roadmap, they will excel, they want to. It's not that he didn't want to learn to read.
Right. It's totally true. I wanted to give you a chance to have some closing thoughts or anything else that you wanted to offer to our audience and see if there's
Yeah, I mean, I
anything.
think it's like part of it too is it's never over, right? Like, it's not like this
That's
is
true.
gonna one day go away and he'll be cured. And I think that's also kind of the exciting part, is that, like, what cool things is he gonna come up with because of it, right? Like, we're not looking to get rid of it. We're looking to exploit it and have him, like, go out and blast it.
And it's so true because we see that there's so many. We know that of the unicorn companies in the Silicon Valley, the ones that have made over $1 billion, there's some study that says somewhere between 40 and 60% of those CEOs and founders are dyslexic.
Yeah.
You know, and we're seeing it in the aerospace industry where they deliberately hire engineers with dyslexia because they think out of the box and it's problem solve better, right? So it really is about how do we take these characteristics and turn them into strengths and into their power and their personal power. At the same time, how do we make sure that they learn the basics? How they learn
That's right.
Navigate the classroom and are able to do that is super. I don't feel like we're one of those programs that say, oh, it's okay, we can use accommodations. Accommodations are great, and they really help kids. But we also want them to be able to go to your restaurant and read the menu.
That's right. Yeah.
And so it's both. Thank you so much for coming on today, Nicole. I really appreciate hearing your story and your enthusiasm. And I'm really wishing Jasper well in his middle school years and high school. I'm really excited to see what he does with his life. And thank you so much for being here. I want to thank Tony Johnson and the team from the Humanity Communications Collective for their guidance and help with this live stream. And I want to tell you that at Learn Up Centers, we're on a mission to teach all kids how to read and how to change. And we want to change how we teachers teach reading. So we're a nonprofit based in San Francisco and tutoring training throughout the world via distance learning. And you can find more about us at learnupcenters.org. As it is Dyslexia Awareness Month, we wanted to share a poem we found inspirational and thought that we would close out with it. The poem is called This is Dyslexia, and it's by Asma Iladawa, who's a dyslexic and made this short little video. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks so much.
I was in primary school when I realized every time I write, red markings always appeared on my textbook. Error after error after error followed me into secondary school. There's a discrepancy between the way that you talk and the way that you write. Teachers kept alliterating. At parents' evenings, my parents would be met with concerns that I wouldn't be able to make it out in the real world, let alone in the classroom. What I didn't know then was that my mind processed in its own unique language. I liked sentences that captured my imagination and flowed to a rhythm, poetry. I liked mixing colors, textures, fabrics, and objects and making them into art, creating. I liked asking where, when, and why so I could understand the way the world operates, critical thinking. The education system wasn't made for people like me. It was rigid in the way it examined intelligence and programmed us to stay within the margins. In the shadows, I kept writing, creating and asking questions because I knew no other way of existing. On a warm June night, a decade later, I came out of the shadows, placed my mic on the stage, took a deep breath, and let my voice break the silence. I spoke sentences accompanied by words I couldn't spell, challenging gender roles, addressing harassment and what it means to be the daughter of an immigrant away from home. I found myself on aeroplanes, trains, and buses, speaking in spaces little me would have screamed of joy had she known the magical future awaiting her. This is dyslexia. It gives us the ability to visualize without limitations, push the boundaries of storytelling and creating, ask questions and find solutions to complex problems we face every day. We are more than the words we spell incorrectly. We are creatives addressing social issues, surgeons saving lives, astronauts exploring the galaxies, athletes pushing the human body to its maximum capabilities, designers and mechanics creating sustainable clothing, cars, and bettering our future. So tell me, would you rather live in a world free of red markings, where our intelligence is measured by how well we write, or embrace a world full of innovators made by dyslexia?